Mr. O'Rourke, everyone available from your side? Are we waiting on everyone? They're all set?
You got everyone, Rob.
Excellent. New York State Racing, Parimutuel Wagering, and Breeding Law, Section 212, which established the New York State Franchise Oversight Board, provides that the board shall consist of 5 members. The presence of 3 members would establish a quorum, allowing the board to undertake action. This present meeting of the Franchise Oversight Board is now called to order. Mr. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Franco?
Present.
Mr. Higgins? Here. Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Pound?
Here.
Mr. Williams?
Present. Mr. Secretary, will you please have the record reflect that a quorum of members are present, thus enabling the transaction of business? Please note that members Smith, Pound, Higgins, and I are in Schenectady, while member Franco is in Albany. Bilateral visual and oral communications between Albany and Schenectady have been established. A special thank you to the Office of General Services for providing the meeting room and technical assistance relative to the meeting production. I'd also like to recognize the participation of our colleagues from the New York Racing Association who have joined us for the meeting. David O'Rourke, Chief Executive Officer and President. Joy Gardner, the Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary. Glenn Kozak, the Executive Vice President, Operations and Capital Projects. Renee Postal, the Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, and I believe is Robert on as well?
I believe so.
And
Yes, I am.
Robert Sorais, the Director of Capital Projects. Is there anyone from NYRA that I missed?
No, I think that's everyone.
I'd also like to recognize the participation of colleagues from Genting, New York, LLC, who have joined us for today's meeting. I believe I saw Kevin Jones indicated. Anyone else that you can recognize?
No.
Mr. Jones, is there anyone else from Genting that's participating today?
So Bob DeSavio may be joining, but we're good here.
Okay, thank you very much for participating.
Thank you.
Minutes of the board conducted on January 31st, 2025 have been provided to the members in advance. At this time, I'd like to ask the members if there are any edits, corrections, or amendments. Hearing none, the minutes as circulated are hereby adopted. Before we commence, I'd like to ask Dave O'Rourke to give us an overview on the recently conducted Belmont Stakes Racing Festival from both a financial and an operational perspective, if you will.
Thanks, Phil. I appreciate the opportunity. So once again, the event reflected passion, enthusiasm, world-class racing at Saratoga. Despite some unpredictable weather, we had over 110 fans visit the track. And for the first time, we opened the festival with a card dedicated to the New York Bred program. And it worked better. We started on Wednesday, we added a day, and the New York Breds were showcased to open the festival on Wednesday, and the weather held out until Friday. Friday, we started to get some rain, and then overnight Friday, we had about 2¼ inches of rain. So we actually had to make some shifts in the racing program, but it all turned out quite well. We moved 2 Grade 1 stakes to Sunday, so we saved them on their natural ground. And the sun came out by midday, and everyone really had a good time. I'd be remiss to point out also on Wednesday night, we worked with the town, and we had about 15 to 20,000 people come out for a free concert. So it was a really good way to kick it off with the New York Breds and having that festival downtown on Wednesday. Coming through, by adjusting that racing program, we definitely hampered handle a little bit, but it was the right thing to do, and we saved the day in terms of everyone's experience, and including the participants who were able to run those races on Sunday. And I guess one of the big sources of news would be that the governor announced this morning that we will be back for a 3rd time, and we will be having the festival next year in Saratoga, and we look forward to that, and then we look forward to opening it at Belmont in 2027. Other than that, Rob, I think that kind of covers most of it. It was a really good time. the weather hit us, but I think we came through it well, and everyone enjoyed it. 110,000 people, and the racing mecca is nothing to be, nothing to bat an eye at. It was a lot of fun.
Any operational concerns relative? I know that the previous year there was a little bit of concerns about relieving congestion in restrooms, and I know that you added quite a bit from that. Is there anything that we should be aware of or you need going into the Saratoga meet?
No, we monitored that all day. We added, hats off to Glenn and the ops team. The place was ready to go a day early. They had a plan last Travers to test how we might address that with adding trailers on the perimeter. We're actually able to hook those trailers up into the septic so it's clean. It worked well. I myself was walking around. I didn't get one complaint on that, which was the goal. So we'll refine a few things once we look through the heat maps and concessions. We brought on the lady Katie Keenan, who's going to serve as our CXO, working on the Belmont project down on Saratoga. So you'll definitely see some refinement, but nothing glaring that we've got through the either the surveys or the comments.
Okay. First item on our agenda is a review. I'm sorry.
Can I just ask a question?
Mr. Riggins?
Hey, thank you. Hey, David, I noticed the on-track attendance was a little lower this year for the actual race day compared to last year. You just chalk that up primarily to the weather, which was pretty horrific, or do you think there was some other circumstances at play there on why the attendance was lower?
The GA tickets were higher, so we did raise the GA tickets slightly. And then when you're sitting there during the week and the walk-ups were lower during the week, I mean, the rain was just kind of ominous towards the end.
Yeah.
But I'd say the overall market might have been a little bit softer. I think you're seeing that not just here, just across the economy, but nothing glaring, nothing concerning.
Okay.
Pushing where we were last year, that was the max. Like, we wouldn't want to get any more folks. At 46,000, it was a nice environment, so we're really happy with the outcome.
Great. Personal experience when we were wandering around in the early part of the card for Belmont Stakes Day, it was extremely empty. As the rain let, there were tremendous amounts of people that were coming in at that point. So I think your GA walk-ups were probably affected by weather and people making other plans. Those who had tickets clearly showed. I mean, but it was late.
Yeah. That's one good point on an ops side. That's the one thing we did. There was kind of a rush to the gate as soon as it started to clear up. Those logistics we'll look at, because it's abnormal for us. It's usually like a consistent flow, late morning into early afternoon. But everyone kind of waited to, make sure the sun came out.
Next item on our agenda is a review of NYRA's preliminary unaudited financial results for the first quarter of 2025. Our review authority is dual. New York Racing Parimutuel Wagering and Breeding Law, Section 212.8A, Romanet 3B, requires that the Franchise Oversight Board to review and make recommendations regarding operating revenues and the establishment of a financial plan, and Racing Law, Section 212.8A, Romanet 3D, requires us to review such franchise corporations' revenue and expenditure policies, which can include a variety of things, including collective bargaining agreements, management or employee compensation plans, vendor contracts, capital improvement plans, et cetera. Ms. Postal, would you please begin to walk us through?
Yes, I would. Thank you. So if we turn to the first page, that's our executive summary. Just a few key metrics. Total handle of $376 million was $4.9 million or 1% higher than budget, and $4.3 million or 1% lower than prior year. Operating expenses of $39.6 million was $733,000 or 1.8% lower than budget, and $513,000 or 1.3% lower than prior year. And our operating loss from racing operation of $14.4 million was $1.3 million or 8% favorable to budget, and $1.1 million or 7.4% favorable to prior year. The next few pages walk through the handle highlights. As you see, we're 1% off a budget in prior year, so pretty flat. One thing to note, though, is we did have one extra race day due to one less cancellation than budget for Q1 2025. If there's no questions on Handle, I'll move on to more of our meat and potatoes, our consolidated income statement for the 3 months ended March 31st. So key net revenue drivers. Net revenue was favorable to budget by $520,000 or 2.1%, and $633,000 or 2.6% favorable to prior year. And that's primarily due to an increase in net wagering revenue from higher handle and favorable margin. Key operating expense drivers for budget to actual, we'll stick in that budget to actual column first. Again, we were $730,000 favorable to budget, or 1.8%. That's primarily, we do have some timing differences in there, so I'm just trying to, the two key items were labor expense was favorable to budget due to timing of filling open positions, and insurance expenses were lower than budget by $272,000, and that's due to anticipated workers' compensation claims lower than budgeted. So actually, I'll skip down to the prior year as well. That's the key difference for the prior year. We did a switch to our insurance program where we went from first dollar insurance for our workers' comp to self-insured. And that was, per actuarial analysis and broker and consultant recommendation. And that saved us a premium of roughly $2.4 million. And that goes from April 1st to March 31st. And we just have, we're gaining from the experience of lower claims. And we did take part of that premium savings and put it aside in a reserve until we build up our cash reserve. So, and we've had great results from that program. That was the right decision to make from our experience from this past year. As well as, that was about $500,000 for this quarter, as well as we have lower property insurance premiums, and that's driven by the reduced footprint at Belmont because we, are under renovation. So that insurance on the construction is now capitalizable. If we move down to the two items in the adjusted operating income, we had interest income that was unfavorable to budget by $700,000 and $1.1 million to prior year. And that's primarily based on the utilization of cash for prior year, slightly lower interest rates, and imputed interest expense. For HISA costs, when we originally did the budget, we had an assessment for 2025 that was higher than what the eventual assessment is now. So we were favorable to budget by $450,000 for Q1 and $197,000 to prior year. And if we look at our non-operating expenses of $4.1 million, we were $338,000 favorable to budget and $2.3 million unfavorable to prior year. As far as the budget goes, we had lower depreciation than anticipated just for the timing of placement of assets. Retiree and benefit expenses were offset by non-recurring compensation due to renegotiation of union contracts. For the prior year, that variance will come down. There was a $900,000 timing difference. We didn't get the adjustment from our actuary until April of 2025. So that unfavorable variance would have been reduced had we gotten it in time by $900,000. So the rest of that difference is due to higher a depreciation as well as the non-recurring compensation.
I know this is not relative to you, but it's a little bit, one of your compatriots may be able to answer it. I usually ask at this point, how are your union negotiations going on? You mentioned the union renegotiation as part of the savings. How many contracts do you have out there? How many are in negotiations right now? And are there any concerns that we should be aware of?
No concerns. It's normal course. Rob, I could circle back with how many are open, but nothing to flag.
Okay.
All right.
I'm sorry, Renee.
And then just the, we have the VLT revenue, a summary page on that. Nothing to note, we're on target, as expected for budget. And then we put some, sorry?
I was looking at the numbers for the first quarter of the year on the VLT revenue, and it seems like it's exceeding expectations, even given all the, I guess, what would you say about the economy? The, softness and the concerns about the economy, but the numbers seem to still be quite strong. Are you sort of anticipating that that's going to continue through the year? Or are you guys looking at the national economy, how things are going on your projections for, the next couple of quarters? I was very surprised that it was higher.
Yeah, I would say on the VLT side, and Renee, correct me if I'm wrong, we're pretty straightforward. It's just like inflationary type budgeting. Is that correct?
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not deep on the analysis on the regional gaming.
Okay.
That might be something, Chris, you pose to Mr. Jones, who's on the call from Genting, when we bring up some Genting issues. But
One of the
also,
things,
that's a comparative, so that's also a question of, was last year a little soft compared to this year?
Yeah.
I'm fine to take that, and chime
take
in
it
here, Kevin from Sourcewell. We've seen a steady increase in revenues. We don't expect there to be a downward trending based on things happening nationally. One of the things that we found is it's recessionary, cycles, and we think that looking across everything we see in our metrics, that we will continue to trend upward.
Wow. That's good news.
For NYRA too?
Yeah.
And then we
Thank
put
you,
some supplementary schedules. Thank you, Kevin. On export, top 10, national ADW handled by state, and capital spending, which I believe we're going to cover in a different section.
Yeah.
The agenda. So that's it, unless there's any other questions.
Anyone else have any questions or concerns, comments relative to the first quarter? Victor?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you.
That moves us on to a requested amendment to NYRA's 2025 capital plan. The Franchise Oversight Board has authority under Racing Law Section 212.8A, Romanet 3G, to receive, review, and approve or disapprove capital expense plans submitted annually by the Franchise Corporation. At our last meeting, the board considered and approved NYRA's capital expense plan for calendar year 2025. NYRA's requested to change from the approved 2025 capital budget to request approval for the board for two projects that were not included in the 2025 capital submission. Both projects relate to the Belmont Park redevelopment project, but are not part of the overall building construction. The first project regards electrical equipment at the main entrance, commonly referenced as Gate 5. As part of routine maintenance of the electrical system in contemplation of development at the new Belmont Clubhouse and in the backyard, NYRA determined the equipment had reached end of life and lacked capacity to support new development. Accordingly, they seek to install a new transformer, new underground conduits, new associated equipment to provide redundant feeds for operations. Installation will also have the benefit of enabling NYRA to isolate electrical feeds serving the backstretch and the new facility, ensuring that if building power fails, the barn area will not be impacted. A transformer that was recently replaced on the property is going to be repurposed and reused. The scope of work for the project includes demolition of the old equipment, modification of existing concrete encased duct banks, installation of new feeder cables, and the supply and installation of new electrical equipment. And the project budget comes to $3.265 million. The second project regards the extension of a previously approved pedestrian tunnel. Specifically, NYRA installed approximately a 500-foot tunnel at Belmont Park located in the southern portion of the tracks beginning from the middle of the infield and ending right before the approximate location of the new Belmont Clubhouse. Authority for this project was included in the approved 2023-2024 capital budgets. As the size and location of the Belmont Clubhouse has been now finalized, there's a necessity to continue the tunnel approximately 75 feet south to allow pedestrian infield access to and from the backyard. NYRA plans to utilize the same precast tunnel system used for the other 3 tunnels, finding it more cost-effective when compared with cast-in-place tunnels. Of note, the installation of the proposed extension will not impact the construction schedule and allows for a full emergency and fire egress pathway over the tunnel once the backfilling is completed. The cost per linear foot exceeds that of the previous 3 tunnels due to additional structural support needed to accommodate the curvature of the tunnel and required radius to maintain ADA compliance for pedestrian and vehicular pathways exiting the tunnel. The project scope of work includes excavating the area, installing precast tunnels, waterproofing, and then backfilling the tunnel. That project comes to $2.543 million. NYRA noted in their request that at the conclusion of calendar year 2024, they had restricted $5.818 million for future capital improvements. Those funds are going to be used for these 2 projects, ensuring that there's no impact to other projects in the approved 2025 capital budget. Mr. Kozak, is there anything you'd like to add to my review of the project request?
No, Mr. Williams, you've covered everything perfectly. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions or concerns relative to the project?
I certainly do.
Don't or do? Do. Mr. Town.
You must have had an engineer or architect working on this from the beginning. Nobody thought about where the power was coming from and whether or not the path to come would be able to handle the additional load? It just seems ridiculous that somebody would build the facility that you're building and nobody bothered to look at where the power is coming from.
No, they did do the engineering on this to look at this, and I think there's 2 separate feeds that come in from PSE&G that bring our feeders in at 13.2. We went through this with the gear to evaluate the gear, and we were coming back with 2 different scenarios. And one of the challenges that we had was to isolate that in the barn area. We had already changed one of those transformers out 4 years ago when we lost the complete feed to the barn area, and we had the issues with sprinkler systems and some of the dorms where we had to put substantial work in those. The engineer from there, now we can isolate not only the barn area and the 2 separate feeds in the barn area, but then all of the buildings. With that scope, we also went through and looked at what areas can be reused as far as conduit that's already in the ground, with a savings of almost $600,000 by doing that work. And then this is when they finally determined on this that it was better to come back to replace this than to use 60-year-old gear for a brand new facility.
Well, that
It's not
triggers the next question.
something that wasn't evaluated, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. That brings the next question. I assume you have a schedule of end-of-life capital equipment, and how is this 60-year-old transformer, or whatever it is, not on somebody's horizon that this could be a problem?
In addition to not only the transformer that fed the main building with the 2 separate feeds going in there that I mentioned, 196 and 199, we've gone through and brought in electrical contractors to review the 56 transformers that are throughout the barn area to evaluate them as well. There's been a program in place to replace the transformers back there that again have had end of life or have shown wear, so that way we've had an independent electrical testing company go through and evaluate those. So that way we can provide, power to the barn area. While doing that work, we've also been able to identify 3 different ways of feeding power to the barn area, similar to what we did 3 months ago when the first transformer went down.
that answers Jim's question. I think
85% of
Jim's question was, why wasn't there an understanding of end of utility for that before you dug it up and found it? In other words, what kind of process do you have for ensuring that there is an adequate, catalog and review of these types of equipment prior to finding them out that they're at end of life?
Yes, and Alemco Electric, who did the work 4 years ago when we had the power, did a study on this. This study was provided to the team to review. Our electrical contractors were going through that. Our electrical engineers through the renovation team were going through and evaluating. This has been something that's been on my radar, Mr. Town, from day one.
Well, I appreciate that, but obviously it's a 5.8, oops.
Not quite, a little under that.
Okay, so I'm not trying to give you a hard time just for giving you a hard time, but in the future, are you planning on engaging as a part of your RFP process for any more capital improvements, an examination of the existing utility infrastructure before you go ahead with the build?
Or perhaps even better, if you had the engineer that went through and created that document evaluation, what else is on that document now?
So is that something that we can count on in the future?
Absolutely, and separating the two with the electric, without question, that will take place going forward, and make sure to get multiple reviews on that as well. As far as the extension that Mr. Williams had referred to, the reason that is taking place is we're removing that scope from the GC because it can be done more cost effectively in the manner that is being described with the precast rather than the cast in place. So that's the reason that was not initially on the capital plan. That was going to be part of the scope for the Belmont redevelopment. And after seeing the work of the other 3 tunnels that were installed, this was a much more efficient and cost-effective way to do it. So that's why we're presenting it to the FOB.
Okay, so in the future, when you're putting out an RFP and when you're receiving responses to the RFP, someone will have looked at, both with respect to the contractor and with respect to the owner, that is you, the issue of supplying utilities, and that cost will be baked into the RFP in some fashion or baked into your budget, rather than be a surprise. Because my next question is, okay, you fortunately have this $5.1 million fund that you're redirecting. What was the intended use of that money that's now being deferred because of the need to apply that reserve here? Or did I misunderstand what you were saying?
It was unallocated.
What did you say?
Yeah, Glenn's in Colorado. Glenn, we can't hear you. So to the extent that you're garbled, if Rob could answer that might be helpful.
So that money was not allocated to any specific capital project.
Why was it reserved if you didn't have capital projects in mind?
Well, we have years of capital projects in mind. It would be reserved for infrastructure type projects. This one just came forth as an opportunity to do the right thing at this moment as the building's going in and secure the electrical infrastructure, not just for the building, but for the backstretch as well.
Okay, well, I'll stop.
I do have a follow-up just on something that Jim mentioned, just for a point of clarity. So if the original, conceptually, the extra piece of the tunnel was contemplated out of the 455, and now you're undertaking it yourself because it's more cost-effective to do it now, does that decrease the 455, or does it allow for unexpected overruns that absorb for that 2.5 million?
It would decrease pressure on it, but there's definitely contingencies in the 455 when you're dealing with budgeting at this scale. So
you would roll that 2.5 million into contingency?
Essentially, yes, Rob. It's to get the building done.
That uncorks another bottle for me, though. If you've got 3 tunnels, this third tunnel, you've determined that it's best done with precast tunnel devices rather than cast in place. Wouldn't somebody have made that determination prior to now? I mean, why did the contractor propose it this way, and yet there's a savings now that you guys have uncovered?
That one I would have to defer to Glenn in terms of, I don't know if I'm qualified to answer the engineering aspect of that.
And again, if you can hear me, apologize for the communication here. The engineer that was doing that work had tied that into the side of the building. So the work that was going through with the foundation and the west end where it would tie in, they had determined to use was the cast in place. And we went to the saving that we had achieved with our other tunnel installation.
Glenn, you're flying at a disadvantage because we're getting every third word. To make this easier, or that is less painful for today, would you mind putting together some short bullet point analysis that I'm talking about, bring it to the next meeting, whatever it is? Things aren't going to change, but I'd just like to know how we got to where we are.
Absolutely. Apologize for the inconvenience.
No, it's not inconvenience. It's just a question that needs to be answered, I think.
Anyone else have any questions about these 2 projects?
I do.
Mr. Higgins?
So I heard the chairman say that these 2 projects will not affect the timeline for completion of the overall project down at Belmont. And I was just wondering if you can elaborate on that and what your confidence level is that this isn't going to, have any major delays, since it's sort of coming up now, right in the middle of everything.
Yeah, I can answer that. No, they have no impact on the timeline whatsoever.
Okay.
That was definitive.
I'll take it. Let's hope it's true.
Mr. Franco, any questions?
So going back to Mr. Higgins' question, I appreciate the answer that Dave gave, but it's not really addressing the core issue of the question. So what makes you believe that you can stay on course, and what's the level of confidence that you'll stay on timeline?
In terms of the overall project,
No. In terms of adding these additional projects.
Well, the electrical feed is outside of really the scope of the building, so it's feeding into the building. The transformers, Glenn's not on, but they're out by gate 5. There's equipment there that the prudent thing is to redo it and do it the right way to service both the backstretch and the building and make it all new. The tunnel itself, it's in motion. I can see it actually being completed. So this is going to be done way before any of the things that might affect timeline with like the envelope of the building. These are totally outside of that actual aspect of it. So they're not really related to actually the construction of the building. It's the tunnel on the side of it, and then it's the feed going in, and that stuff's going to be done.
To allay a little concern with Member Franco's question, just a reminder to my fellow board members, we have a management representative through the Lero Group that is participating on a week-to-week basis, which one of the elements that they do is obviously weighing in on timeline concerns and construction concerns. So we get not necessarily a real-time determination on it, but every other week we're actually getting a professional impression of our own representative illustrating whether or not there's any concerns with the timeline or whether we've been obviated, whether the construction's obviated from the timeline that's been proposed. I do believe that there's an updated schedule that's coming with our next review, which will be next week. 2 weeks? Next week. Next week is anticipated. And everything up to this point, our representative, Lero Group, has indicated that everything remains on timeline and actually a little ahead of timeline. They were a little bullish on that, actually.
Your access code or meeting number.
Yep. And the last piece on that, I circulate a monthly report that comes in from the Lero Group on our behalf as well, that at least starts with their interpretations. It's a month old by the time we get it, but it starts with their professional understanding of the timeline.
Yeah, those reports are helpful.
Yes.
Just to also add some further context, why we're so confident that it's not going to impact the schedule. The placement of the cranes for the actual building construction is not impacted by the tunnel. So the tunnel is more on the western side. So they're able to continue building construction without being impacted at all.
Mr. Smith?
Just to follow up from Mr. Town, his issues and concerns, are you confident at this point that going forward that there won't be future similar type issues that arise as construction moves forward?
Yes, I mean, Rob, the building itself is almost completely bought, isn't it correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, so we're kind of running out of potential surprises. So yes, the answer would be yes. We are confident.
Okay. Any other questions about these two projects?
I can keep going, but I won't. That's a question, say, Dave, when the package was put together and went to the state and got an award of $455 million for this project, it just seems to me that somebody would have known or should have anticipated that there was this other $5.8 million or whatever it is, and you should have asked for 500 or 460 million instead of 455. Is it that, am I being too simple? Somebody's missed something, because you can't put this in the middle, no place, and say, what are we connecting for utilities? Somebody should have looked at that and presented it to the state, so the state could make a determination about whether that extra $5 million was a bridge too far. It just seems, I'm a simple guy, so.
I think it was addressed to you, Mr. O'Rourke.
I mean, one would be the tunnels themselves were, I believe, funded out of the capital account. Like, so there's going to be issues that pop up in terms of funding for this project. We're in a great spot. The project's almost completely bought. This building will be delivered. In terms of the electric, now I'm not the expert. Glenn's the expert, but this project could have moved forward without addressing it. We didn't feel that it was the right thing to do. And we believe the right thing to do is to set this infrastructure for the next 50 to 60 years. And it was the right investment at this time to do on the electric side. On the tunnel side, I defer to Glenn, because it's really the finishing off of the tunnel on the clubhouse side for the determination of who performed the work, who controlled it. These tunnels are also very close underneath, essentially, the racetracks. Glenn's done all the racetrack work. So I think these are both prudent decisions and good decisions. And in terms of scoping out everything under this building, I think I'm quite proud of what this management team's done and where we're at right now, and what we're about to deliver in the fall of 26.
Well, first of all, don't take it that I'm criticizing your management team. I think you probably had some outside professionals who should have said, oh, by the way, is there enough water to this facility? Is there enough electricity? Do we need to look at any of the useful life of those piece of devices, capital equipment? That's my only, I just don't know who should have accepted responsibility or for providing you with this information, your team, because it sounds like you were blindsided as well, and that may be incorrect, but you didn't know this was coming, otherwise you would have asked for it. And it would seem to me that somebody should have said, oh, by the way, we designed this building, we need X amount of whatever it is, in electrical units to run it. Where is that coming from?
Yeah, I think what was there was capable to accomplish it, but I think the prudent thing is to redo it. And that was the decision that was placed in front of me at least, and I believe Glenn. And I know Glenn has had his eye on this for quite a while. And this is really us just bringing it to this board and saying this is the right thing if we're going to invest in the infrastructure for this campus for the long run. I don't think it was inadequate for the building, but I don't think it was optimal either. I think this is the optimal solution.
Well, okay, and that may very well be true, and that would be nice. I also wonder if there has been a cost savings long-term to you by doing it now in the midst of construction as opposed to doing it replacement once everything was up and operational 10, 15 years from now. It's got to be cheaper doing it now when there's no, public activity, there's no anything going on other than construction, then wait till everything's in place, trying to run the place, and all of a sudden you got giant transformer you got to replace. I assume it's cheaper now.
It's more convenient as well. That's true.
Yeah.
I wasn't focusing on that aspect.
That's right.
That's very true.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Dave did raise a point which I had forgotten about. The original tunnels were funded out of NYR Capital, not as part of the 455. So I'd forgotten about. That was something that they were doing in anticipation of the other construction to try to get ahead because of its potential effects on some of the racetracks surfaces as well.
So is it the construction that was going on that prompted looking at precast as opposed to cast in place tunnel?
Yes.
Or alternatively, when this was in your capital budget, X amount of dollars for putting in tunnels, you probably used an outside accounting and architecture and engineering company. Did they discuss with you at that time, there is an alternative, it might be cheaper, precast?
And the way it played out is we've got one engineering firm that handles everything in the infield for the racing surfaces, and that's why we went that route with the 4 tunnels. There's a different engineering firm that handles everything for the actual facility or building construction. After we saw what the numbers were coming in at, that's when we brought this method and to their attention that it would be more cost effective. And in fact, after the bidding, it certainly was.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions relative to the 2 projects? Hearing none. Before us is resolution number 2502, approving NYRA's capital expense plan for calendar 2025, amended to reflect the inclusion of these 2 specific projects. Does anyone have any questions relative to the resolution? Hearing none, may I have a motion to accept resolution 2502?
Also move.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. At this point in each meeting, we've traditionally undertaken some reviews of other NYRA documents or projects. I think we've touched a little bit upon it here as these 2 initial projects that were discussed, but I think it would be a good idea for the board to hear a little bit overarching on the project spending since the last time we spoke at a high level, and perhaps a review of contracts that are executed or completed, what's anticipated for the future, and also on a high level, perhaps some insight on the minority-owned, women-owned, and service-disabled, veteran-owned business utilization and general workforce mobilization. When we're done with that, I want to walk through some of the quality of life projects as well. But from a practical standpoint, could you provide us an overview on the redevelopment project?
Sure. I'll start out with the construction, and then Rob can certainly go into where we are with procurement and then also the WMBs. So currently, we've got the MEPs going in the ground for the entire facility. The concrete for the first floor as well as the marshalling yard is complete. First floor deck is done. Second floor deck is complete, and third floor deck, I believe, is about 45 or 50%. The 2 stair towers coming up through the western portion of the building for the 4th and 5th floor are currently being poured right now. There's steel that is coming on site. I believe it was supposed to be here today or early next week to start the steel for the 3rd floor as well as the 4th floor and 5th floor. Utility work that can be done in the building for the systems, sprinkler drainage, fireproofing, that's all currently taking place. The next big phase for us is the actual steel that's coming on site for the superstructure. With the plans with that, Rob will touch on the procurement of the escalators, the elevators, what's being shipped as far as the generator and our HVAC systems. That's all been procured as well. And then the next big phase for us is the site work, which will include the patio and the area to get back into the new paddock or saddle installs.
Yeah, I could jump in now. I guess first I'll start with kind of a financial update. So spending to date has been about 97.7 million, and that's driven by about 59.3 million in hard trade costs and 32.4 million for the CSIP program. NYRA did receive its second funding disbursement for $44 million, and our third funding request will be submitted to ESD this month. As far as the procurement, so Tishman has awarded approximately 85% of their primary trades, with all contracts for the core and shell and interior fit out being awarded. As Glenn kind of touched upon, we are expecting structural steel next week. The glass for the curtain wall is being fabricated, and assembly is expected to start sometime in July, with first deliveries beginning in Q4 of this year. The metal panels for the ribbon and canopy, which is also a very big component, those deliveries are expected to begin also in Q4 of 2025.
We had talked about this previously. Are there any concerns at this point relative to tariffs?
You read my mind, literally.
No.
No, so the steel is being fabricated in the United States. We have not, we're aware of the tariffs. We're trying to track them as best as we can. It's difficult because it's coming from different places. So, we're monitoring it, but there's no real concern at this point yet.
Maybe I missed it. Honestly, I wasn't paying attention. Anybody provide an overview on MWB and service?
No, but I certainly can. So NYRA and Tishman continue to meet with community groups, small and large businesses, local leadership, to ensure that we're doing everything possible to communicate these opportunities that are created by the construction here. We're hosting an event for MWBs and local businesses later this month, and that's focused on getting second and third tier subcontractors to meet some of the prime contractors. To date, there's been about 40 outreach events, and we've had participation from over 1,500 attendees. If you look at the trade contracts that are enrolled in the MWB portal, we're doing okay. We're in very, very good shape with the MBEs coming in right around our 15% goal. We're at about 7% for WBEs and 3% for SDVOBs, so we have a little work there. But we've been actively working with the primes to onboard MWBE and veteran subcontractors. And, we feel confident that by the end of this project, we will meet the diversity goals that have been set forth by the state.
I'm sorry, I missed. What was the service disabled that you're at?
It's about 3% right now.
Okay, thanks. Any specific questions about the Belmont project at this point? I'm going to, hearing no other questions, I'm going to just, rather than giving a background on any of the quality of life, just could you give me an overview as to where you're at? I know some of these have been completed or in the process of being completed relative to Belmont, but let's start with new dormitories. How's that progressing?
So let's start at Saratoga with the Saratoga dorms. We just had our second.
Well, I'm talking specifically, Glenn, about the quality of life at Belmont.
Okay, sorry.
We'll hit Saratoga investment in a few minutes.
Okay, so Dorm 3 was put in place last July. That's operational. That's completely occupied now. Dorm 4 is about 80%, will be completed by the end of July. That we're waiting on some tile work on that, some showers, but the utility infrastructure is all in place there. Wi-Fi through the barn area is complete. That was just wrapped up about 2 weeks ago. Fire alarm, and for not only the dorms but all the cottages, we're at about 90% with that. There's just a few small dorms that have been modified to complete that work. The blue light system that was installed, that will be complete by next week. Current testing is going on as we speak, and their factory rep will be in to go over that with our security department. So that'll be another task done. 2 of the 4 bike rack storage units are complete. Perimeter fencing, we've got about almost 3,600 feet complete. So we're done from gate 5 to Plainfield Avenue. And then we're just right now going from Plainfield Ave up to gate 7, and that will complete the southern and eastern exposure to the track. And then we've got about 1,100 feet to do up adjacent to Floral Park. So that will all be done by the beginning of Q4 this year. The other work that we're taking place is, which we have a permit in place with OGS, is for the rec hall upgrades, and that will take place. We're working with the operator, so when we're at Saratoga and the population is a little bit lighter, to do that work while we're at Saratoga. And we're currently designing the last dorm, Dorm 5, to have that paperwork available for review to OGS by the end of Q3, so we could start possible foundation work by Q4 of this year. And
How's
the other
healthcare improvements going? The health clinic.
healthcare, yep, that is, we're waiting for a certificate from the engineer and architect through Northwell to provide for OGS. And then that will be complete. All the work is complete, and we're just waiting for that formal paperwork to supply to OGS for a CCC on that project. And the last thing that
Go ahead.
sorry, that I forgot to mention is the stormwater improvement. That will complete. That will complete when we're done with the video boards in the infield. So we're looking at a Q1 completion on that, just because we have to get the foundations for the video boards in before we put that final phase of drainage in. That will again keep all the track stormwater runoff on the in the infield of the new Belmont Park.
So from a practical standpoint, you say you're in actually very good shape on completion of the quality of life that we outlined for when you open at Belmont.
Absolutely. I think we're going to have 9 of these done by Q4 of this year.
Anyone have questions about the quality of life or anything else at Belmont? Now let's move on to Saratoga. Before we start about the Saratoga investment, you had an incidence of fire on May 27th. Just a couple of questions I have there is, first of all, where and what was the cause that you're aware of? But probably more importantly, given what we approved a few years ago, which was the development of the fire station, how was the fire response?
The fire response was outstanding, and I think the collaboration between not only the NYRA Fire Department, NYRA Fire investigators, as well as the state and also Saratoga Springs, the amount of equipment that was dispatched, but also the manner in which they took action on the event. They were very, very focused on the areas without just ripping and tearing apart the historic building. So we certainly want to appreciate how the firemen did their work. Fortunately, the upgrades that have been done in the systems there certainly have paid off with the new fire alarm system that was upgraded a few years ago. The fire pump, fortunately, did not have to kick on for the service. And then also, again, I'd rather not comment on the cause because it's still under investigation with the agencies. So I will provide the group an update once we receive that information. Fortunately, the response of having the fire department that close to the location, there was very, very minimal impact, and the work of not only our union trades, but also the coordination with OGS and our architect and engineer, in a matter of 3 days, it was repaired and operational.
That's great. Moving on to a couple of the other larger projects at Saratoga. Can you give us a little bit of an overview on the viewing stands in the Outrider building?
Sure. So along Oklahoma, working with Saratoga Springs Preservation, we were able to improve the clocker stand that's adjacent to the Oklahoma track and be able to accommodate 2 new restrooms, permanent restrooms that are ADA compliant, in order for the public, when they are viewing training in the morning, to access that area. And directly adjacent to that, we established a viewing area that fans can stand and watch training, and with the weather like we received last weekend, have an area that they're not going to get rained on to be able to handle viewing. So those are the 2 that were done prior to the start of the meet.
And was there incorporation of, I know you had some wood that you got out of, what, Maryland?
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to purchase a bunch of timber framing, and we're working with the 2 local architects that NYRA uses to be able to incorporate that style that meets not only the guidelines with preservation, but what we're looking to achieve in the backyard. So I think hopefully we're going to be presenting some other areas that we'd like to put permanent either pavilions or structures in, similar to the Whitney Pavilion, that would hopefully will be more efficient and be able to accommodate the needs of either giveaways or the festival tent, or an area adjacent to the Big Red Spring through the backyard, and lose some of the temporary structures that we have to get permitting for each year. And again, be more cost effective with our trades, with not having to take them up and down for the seasonal application.
You had also, I interrupted you, you were starting to talk about dormitory B at Saratoga.
Yeah, sorry about jumping the gun on that, but Dorm A we completed last year, and then we were able, again, working with an outside contractor, MLB, who did that work for us on the dorm. They completed it for use for the Belmont Stakes Racing Festival. So it was completed with a CCC, landscaping all done. So again, it's 2 brand new facilities within the last 2 years that have been upgraded at Saratoga.
So obviously that begs the question of what have you removed from services housing as you've increased beds in Dorm A and Dorm B?
And that's what we're working with preservation on right now. So there's a couple areas that we're going to look to propose to the FOB for next year's capital plan, including the assembly barn, again, to use some of that timber framing to get away from the temporary tents that are currently there, knock a couple of the older structures down to be able to incorporate what we're currently using for veterinary offices and trailers in that area. And then some of the other areas have just been used now for storage rather than housing that have been updated.
To kind of reconsider my question, are you taking out beds that were used in these cottages as you add new beds in Dorm A and Dorm B? So in other
Correct.
words, I understand the conceptually, perhaps the lack of maintenance on the historic cottages that were used for that, but you're no longer using the same number is what I'm getting at.
Correct. The 1,000 beds that we have up at Saratoga is a number that's adequate, and it works for our operation up there. So you're absolutely right. It's 1,000 that we'll stick with up there, and as new beds come into place, older units are either getting repurposed or not being used for housing.
we talked a little bit in passing about a women's dormitory at Saratoga and its status. Could you shed a little insight onto that?
Sure. So that's the two-story building inside of Clare Court, and that will be operational for the Belmont or for the Saratoga race meet. We're currently going through a total renovation where the building was raised, foundation was redone underneath that, and then all new systems, including fire and sprinkler in there, new restrooms, new siding, new windows. And again, we're at the final phase of that. There's about 80% completion on that. We're in painting and tiling in the restrooms right now, and then that will be done for the meet.
And while it's not a substantial amount, it's something that is at least visible to most people. You're doing some improvements on perimeter fencing at Saratoga?
Yeah, we're starting to, and that's one of the things that we're trying to work with preservation on, where we took a bunch of the fencing down from Belmont that we're trying to repurpose some of that in specific areas. So we're working with preservation on that to try and, again, do something that's cost effective and stay with the actual wrought iron that's been used in the past, rather than transition to some of the faux aluminum fencing. And that would be a Q3 and Q4 project. So the work that you're currently seeing is just fixing damaged areas at this point. So it's not a full renovation.
Okay. Anyone have questions about the Saratoga capital investment? Beyond what I...
You just point one other thing out. That was a substantial investment for the TV department. Also on that Belmont Stakes Racing Festival week, we lost a transformer. We didn't, but there was a transformer that was damaged on Henning Road. And because of the UPS backup for the NYRA TV production, we were able to change the power, how it was fed into the building, lose a little bit of power on Oklahoma. All the systems stayed intact for TV because of that truck that was purchased, and we were able to keep the card going and only lose about 25 minutes of race time. So again, a substantial investment, but it proved worth every penny with what we were able to use for this meet.
Thank you. Mr. Town, you were...
We've talked before, and you were nice enough to give me an analysis of, Glenn, I believe came from you, of the cost differential between meeting the demands or requirements of historic preservation and the cost of replicating the particular building outside the controls or problems that additional costs that historic preservation puts on construction. Have you been able to make any progress with working in conjunction with historic preservation to perhaps have them look at things a little differently through more than one lens? Because their requirements, as you know, increase the cost of construction rather substantially, with no appreciable, that I can see, benefit to the public, since most of these buildings can't be seen by the public. And so we're wasting taxpayers' money to do something that really has nothing to do with historic preservation, because the public will never appreciate it. I just hate to keep beating that drum, but something that keeps coming up. And then in that regard, do you need any assistance from Franchise Oversight Board to try to coordinate a meeting so that we can adequately express to them the issue with respect to the money that we're trying to preserve for operational issues rather than for visuality purposes that nobody can visualize?
And again, the first question is, yes, we have made some advancements with that. The two buildings that Mr. Williams had asked about along Oklahoma, we were able to use a different style roofing on that with just a 4-tab shingled roof. So there was substantial savings by using that material, and that's hopefully something that we will continue to work with preservation on going forward with these new builds. As always, certainly appreciate any opportunity to have that discussion with NYRA, FOB, and Saratoga Springs Preservation on future projects, just to get everybody's input would be fantastic. So we would certainly appreciate that. And then the final thing that that I forgot to mention in the updates up at Saratoga, we did add restrooms to the post bar on the second floor to accommodate that. There's a function area upstairs that can accommodate anywhere up to, I believe it's like 30 to 45 people. And that was one of the things that in the initial build, there was not restrooms in that area. So we did install those. Those were completed prior to the racing festival, as well as all the awnings installed on the spa verandas for the Belmont Racing Festival.
As you may recall, Chairman Williams and I had a meeting with Assemblywoman Carrie Warner a year ago or 2 years ago?
A year ago.
A year ago. And she seemed quite excited about injecting herself in this process and was going to get back to us. She didn't get back to me. I don't know if she said to you, Ron, but I haven't heard anything.
Specifically on these, I think it's right to bring up again.
I think it really needs to, we need to take some financial pressure off of you, which takes some financial pressure off the taxpayers. That's really the drum I'm beating. So maybe we could set something up with her and representatives of NYRA, and we could, and historic preservation, and everybody could sit around a table and try to figure out a solution rather than what currently goes on, which is you guys pulling your hair out, putting up buildings at a cost that is extravagant.
Certainly appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody have any additional questions relative to capital projects that are underway or proposed at this point? Victor?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to contracts valued over $50,000 in single and sole source exceptions. I have two that I have questions about, but I see Mr. Higgins digging in already, so I would imagine he'll have a couple. The first one I have is relative to flowers and flower provision. I saw reported in the December submission that Cube Pack won a bid for 2025, but then in April I see that there's another one, 1-800-Flowers, that appears to have won an identical bid. I wonder if you could reconcile that for me.
Sure. 1-800-Flowers is for all the flower blankets. The former provider that used to make all the flower blankets was no longer interested in doing it. So we had to use somebody that would be able to make the, for the Grade 1 races, make the flower blankets. So Q-Pack is strictly for the bulk flowers that we order for Belmont or for Saratoga plantings.
Okay, for Saratoga. I don't think it was terribly clear in the reporter. And well, this is not a criticism relative to this, but I did notice in February, Richard Sears tree inspection was included for tree examination and inspection at Saratoga. It was kind of curious when their work commenced given the damage in barn 19 last week, and whether that particular tree had been something that was under inspection or he hadn't gotten to that particular location yet.
No, all the trees are surveyed on that, and that's something that we do annually, just not only for the barns and for the backstretch, but also the area around the paddock and the backyard. And unfortunately, with some of those trees, we lost a major leader that went through barn 19, and it wasn't something that was visible, and we ended up having to take that tree down. But there is a not only do we use that company, we also use previously Lewis Tree Service up here at Saratoga, and would go through with an annual report of the trees and their conditions. And in addition to the tree trimming, then there'll be a follow-up with a tree planting program to be able to add additional trees after.
So the contract with Sears, is that related to just inspection, or does that, what else does it include? Trimming? Anything else?
Trimming and the removal of the trees. We do not, that's something that our group does not have the skill set to be able to do any of the trimming. So they're a certified arborist.
So who provides pest control with respect to the trees? Spraying them, injecting them, feeding the trees?
There's two different companies that we use. They're not one of the companies that they're just for doing the cutting. Let me get you the names of the companies, but they're two large firms, nationwide firms that we use on that.
One of you used to use Davy Tree. That's
Correct.
I don't know if you-
Correct. And we still do use Davies Tree on smaller scale. And again, the work that went out on some of this was out to, with it being bid for the tree inspection and removal. So that was a deal.
Anyone else have any questions relative to contracts? Mr. Higgins?
So just looking at the report in the materials, it looks like there's two separate $300,000 contracts for electric work, one for Schenectady Electric and a separate one for our electric for the same amount of money, and the description is identical, and I'm just wondering why that is, rather than just one larger contract, one single provider? Why you need multiple vendors there?
Our specializes in high voltage, so anytime we have any high voltage or transformer work,
Glenn, you're sort of breaking up.
To do that work.
What, Glenn, we can't hear you.
No, we don't have Glenn at all.
Ours is high voltage. Schenectady is general electric work.
So it's just so I sort of it's hard to understand you there. One of them is for larger high voltage projects on the campuses, and then another one is for just more general electrical services like replacing outlets and things like that?
Correct.
Is the scope of the work? Okay, so the scope is different for each of them.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And then my second question, I noticed on here there is another contract for Mazzone for $198,300 for the catering for the Belmont Foundation. Is that for next year that you guys are already incorporating this? Because I thought this was in the previous materials, this contract for Mazzone that we reviewed at our last meeting. This is on page 2.
So this one is just related to the Belmont Gala for the NYRA Foundation. So that's not paid out of NYRA money, that's paid out of the NYRA Foundation donations for the gala. This is the So there is a separate contract for Mazzone services for NYRA, for the 1863 Club and various concession stands there, but this was for a specific event. And this is, the event was held at Phasic Tipton, who donated their space, and this is the in-house caterer there.
Is this for the one that just happened, or is this for next year?
Yes. No, the one that just happened. This was in April for the June event.
I think the more important takeaway on that is that $198,000 is paid out of the foundation and not out of NYRA.
Correct.
I think that might, for future monthlies that come in, if you can make that reflection in there, that would help us. So that way we can differentiate between what is actually being spent by NYRA corporate or what is through the foundation. I think that would be helpful, because that's something I was not aware of.
Yeah, for accounting purposes, it seems like it's coming out of NYRA funds.
Well, I'm not even certain for accounting purposes. These sheets just don't tell you that.
Sure.
These are so basic.
Yeah.
And that certainly changes the scope of some of our questions. Especially our last meeting in January, where we had this conversation. That entire conversation would have changed if we'd known it was coming out of the foundation and not out of NYRA.
Yeah.
Okay. It makes a big difference.
Do you report other contracts of NYRA Foundation that we need to be aware of?
Or any other contracts, period, that that aren't paid by NYRA, but paid by some other entity.
Right.
There's only two in this report, then one below it too, for Cerbelli Entertainment, was also paid by NYRA Foundation for the gala.
So when you say,
I think just to clarify, the things that are for the foundation, they're showing up on the report because we follow the same purchasing policy. But it doesn't.
Oh, no, I understand why they're there. It's just reflecting that these are different, or it'd be very helpful to us.
Well, I think
We
good
can
for the
do
public
that.
to know that the money's not coming out of NYRA's operating budget.
Well, which is
Yes,
what we want.
definitely. We can make
Yeah.
that. We can make that clear on the.
I think that
report.
transparency benefits you, as
Okay.
much as the.
or a separate schedule would be even better, just a non-NYRA,
That's what we'll do.
We can do that moving forward. Just
Yeah,
complete
no,
a separate
that-
schedule for foundation events.
Great.
That really changes the scope of our conversation from January and what's bled into us internally in February.
Yes.
okay.
Those are my only questions.
Victor, you have any questions about contracts?
No, just the foundation one. So you guys hit that. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions relative to NYRA's portion of this meeting? If not, we can move on to the Genting related. Mr. Smith, Higgins, Town, Franco?
Good.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to the next piece, which is item 6, which is the Amendment 2 to the First Amendment and Restated Facilities Ground Lease Agreement between the Franchise Oversight Board and Genting New York LLC. Following NYRA's emergence from bankruptcy in 2008, the state leased Aqueduct Racetrack to NYRA, subject to development of a video lottery gaming facility at the racetrack by a future third party. Following a 2010 public procurement, Genting New York LLC was selected to develop and operate the gaming facility. NYRA then assigned its leasehold interest in the Aqueduct grandstand and parking lots to Genting, taking a sublease to continue racing operations. Genting and the Franchise Oversight Board entered into a first amended and restated facilities ground lease agreement on or about September 13th, 2010, that authorized the development of what has now become Resorts World New York City. The board approved Amendment 1 to the First Amended and Restated Facilities Ground Lease Agreement on June 28, 2017. This amendment effectuated language contained in the 2016 enacted state budget, wherein the tax law was amended to authorize Genting to accept a video lottery capital award allowance, which, if accepted, obligated Genting to construct and operate a hotel and convention space at Aqueduct of at least $300 million in value. The purpose of the lease amendment before us today is to afford the state property at Aqueduct Racetrack to be included in the bidding process established for Chapter 56 of the laws of 2022, the enacted New York State budget, which established a new competitive siting process and criteria for the remaining 3 commercial casino licenses. Pursuant to this provision, the Gaming Facility Location Board issued a request for applications to develop and operate a gaming facility in New York State on January 3rd of 2023. New York Racing Parimutuel Wagering and Breeding Law Section 1316, which establishes minimum license thresholds for commercial casinos, establish criteria for applicant eligibility regarding property upon which a gaming casino facility is to be sited. Specifically, Section 1316.2 requires an applicant for license to own or acquire within 60 days after a license has been awarded the land where the gaming facility is proposed to be constructed, provided, however, that ownership of the land shall include a tenancy for a term of years under a lease that extends not less than 60 years beyond the term of the gaming license issued. Resorts World leasehold for video lottery gaming operations extends through October 9th of 2042, while its encumbrance of land for the operation of the hotel and convention space extends through October 9th of 2067. Accordingly, their ability to maintain a qualifying bid is deficient by terms of leasehold length. Of course, the present documents also all reference their ability to operate and conduct video lottery gaming, which at the time of the lease execution was the highest form of gambling then permitted by the state constitution. From a state interest perspective, maximizing the return on the land for the purposes of raising revenue in aid or in support of education, and maximizing revenue for government for the use of the facilities of the state racing franchise is paramount. It's in the best interest of the state to enable Genting to submit a response to the commercial casino request for application, which would allow evaluation of such bid by the Gaming Facility Location Board. Support for this allowance can be identified in the legislation authorizing the present licensing process, which specifically contemplated video lottery gaming facility eligibility, in that the law obligates any converted video lottery gaming facility to hold harmless educational revenue presently received. Practically, board representatives have been careful in ensuring permissions to bid do not unduly favor or disfavor Genting. To that end, language has been developed regarding a process for the evaluation and determination of an equitable, fair market value ground lease payment for the use of lands exceeding Genting's present encumbrance. I want to make clear that the amendment governs only the present footprint and does not contemplate the remainder, upon which the racetrack and backstretch facilities are situated. Development of these lands is pursuant to a differing provision of law. Practically pursuant to section 212(8)(a) Romanet 1 of the Racing Parimutuel Wagering and Breeding Law, the board is authorized to represent the state in all real estate development proposed for Aqueduct Racetrack, provided that such development be undertaken pursuant to a competitive process approved by the board. As section 1306 of the Racing Parimutuel Wagering and Breeding Law, as amended by Part RR of Chapter 56 of the laws of 2022, established a competitive process for the selection of applicants to be awarded a gaming facilities license, and the Gaming Facilities Location Board has issued a request for applications to develop and operate a gaming facility in New York State. The adoption of that RFA as a competitive process for the use of the present Genting footprint at Aqueduct is appropriate to enable such development should they prevail in the competitive process. Accordingly, before the board is a resolution to allow the present video lottery gaming facility footprint at Aqueduct Racetrack to be considered as a potential site of a gaming facility pursuant to Article 13 of the Racing Parimutuel Wagering and Breeding Law, by adopting and approving the Gaming Facility Location Board's request for applications to operate a gaming facility in New York State as a competitive process for proposed real estate development at Aqueduct Racetrack. That's engaged in resolution number 2504. Does any members have any questions relative to the resolution?
I'm sorry, Rob, just so I understand.
Sure.
2504 deals with the amendments to the lease.
Whoops, then 2503. I am wrong. Yeah, 2503.
Okay. I don't have any questions.
You know how many times you go through something and you still write it wrong? You at field drafting must really appreciate that.
The racing law is confusing to begin with, let's be honest.
So it's resolution 3 is before us right now, which specifically is entitled Adoption of the Gaming Facility Location Board's Request for Applications to Develop and Operate a Gaming Facility in New York State. Any questions relative to resolution 3? Victor?
No.
No.
May I have a motion to accept resolution 2503?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is adopted. So our next consideration is resolution 04, which is the approval of amendment 2 to the first amended and restated facilities ground lease agreement. To start, This language of the proposed amendment is effective only should Genting New York LLC be recommended for licensure by the Gaming Facility Location Board and licensed by the Gaming Commission. At a high level, there are four main elements of the proposed amendment. First, the amendment extends the present ground lease for Aqueduct for a term of years not less than 60 years beyond the term of the commission-issued commercial casino license. Second, the amendment also eliminates references to video lottery gaming, as that language would not be effective should Genting be licensed as a commercial casino. That said, Genting will not be able to hold both a video lottery gaming license contemporaneously with a commercial casino license for the Aqueduct property.
Can you just say that again, Rob? I'm sorry, I was writing something.
Yeah, basically what that does is it eliminates video lottery from the lease itself because you can't hold both licenses at once.
I did see that.
Third, the amendment creates a process for the establishment of additional rent for the years Genting would hold the lease as a commercial casino and ensures finality of this additional rent determination by a date certain. And finally, the lease provides certain non-competition language for development that could be considered for the lands to be vacated by NYRA following their move to Belmont Park. The exclusion includes video lottery gaming as authorized by Section 1617A of the tax law and does not permit the establishment of a gaming facility as authorized under Article 13 of the Racing Parimutuel Wagering and Breeding Law. Accordingly, before us is a resolution to approve Amendment 2 to the first amended and restated facilities ground lease agreement, subject to the completion of the State Environmental Quality Review Act process for this action and the award of the gaming facilities license to Genting to be cited at Aqueduct, and further authorizes the board chair to execute on behalf of the board the amendment in substantially the form submitted and attached to the resolution, and a memorandum of lease amendment and any other documents necessary to record or otherwise confirm Genting's leasehold interest. Does anyone have any questions relative to resolution? Wow, I did that one wrong here too. 2504.
I have one you answered about the lease only kicking in if they in fact are awarded a casino by the commission through the site selection board process. I have a question. What's the rent that the state gets now?
We have received $1 as a prepaid advance rent for the turf of the property. Mr. Lowenstein?
$1 per year for the.
$1 per year.
That's what we're getting now, subject to the 2010 lease. So that's a significant change here because an appraiser is going to appraise this significantly.
We would expect it to exceed $1.
Okay, that was that question. And then the non-competition section, I just want to make sure I understand this. In section 14.23 of the lease, the non-competition section, is this what you were referencing just now, Rob? Or is this, can you just say?
There is existing non-competition language right now that was included in the original amendment from 2017. This modifies that language and restricts it more generally to specific Section 1617A issued video lottery gaming or Article 13 commercial casinos, which obviously at the conclusion of the process, the 3 licenses most likely would have been awarded anyway.
Okay. What is this racetrack ground lease that is referenced in conducted at the premises or the property demised under the racetrack ground?
That's the property that NYRA has right now.
Okay.
That the racetrack at Aqueduct is
separate sort of
seated on, as well as the backstretch property that extends out to where Community Board 10 starts.
Got it. And this is just making, this section, just so I understand, is making it clear that you cannot have gaming activity on those premises.
You cannot have a video lottery or an Article 13.
That's what I thought. Okay. Got it. It was a little confusing, but I appreciate you sort of walking me through that. And the only other thing I just wanted to note here is like in the lease itself, at the end, this is still going to be subject to Attorney General review and approval and State Comptroller review and approval pursuant to other provisions of state law.
That is correct.
Okay, so this is not the final say.
Yeah. Hence, you see,
Yeah.
in the red line version, you see the new names for the new Attorney General. and the
Yeah,
new-
I'm just trying to
Control.
put that in the record. I think that's an important point to know, that there's going to be an additional layer of review of this, you know, by other state agencies.
That is correct. Are there any other questions relative to the resolution or the lease? Victor?
No.
May I have a motion to accept Resolution 2504?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries. There being no new business on the agenda, do members have any old business that they would like to raise? The one concern I think we did have was addressed with Mazone stuff. The Mazone consideration.
Yeah.
Hearing none, that concludes today's published agenda. Just a note to my fellow members, there are a few straggling comments left to be considered in the State Environmental Review Quality Act process for Resorts World Casino Expansion Phase 2 project. That's the seeker that governs this next development. When those have been resolved, a notice of completion of the final environmental impact statement will be prepared. To close out, the Franchise Oversight Board must accept the final environmental impact statement for the project as complete, and then issue a finding statement declaring that all seeker requirements for making decisions on this action have been met. We can't, however, adopt the finding statement before the passage of 10 calendar days from the notice publication. The 10-day period is not a comment period. Rather, it's to allow agencies and the public time to consider the final environmental impact statement. That is, to receive notice that the final environmental impact statement has been filed and to allow them to evaluate its content. Accordingly, we're going to need another meeting, likely around the turn of the calendar to July for this particular issue. Would anyone from OGS care to add anything regarding that process?
No, we're good, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we conclude, I do want to publicly thank Steve Lowenstein and Dave Perino, our administrative officer and counsel to the Franchise Oversight Board, the New York State Office of General Services Associate Attorney Michelle Reel, and Chris McManus and Rich Geist from the Division of Budget. There were a lot of work that went into the lease preparation and negotiation. And I thank all of them for their diligent efforts in that regard. I have nothing further to discuss. Members have any other items that they would like for consideration? Hearing none, this meeting of the Franchise Oversight Board is now adjourned. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Happy Father's Day.
Thank you.